Hello and welcome to Binge of the Week. I'm your host, Sonia, aka Binge of the Week. Today's episode, Masters of the Cartoonish Universe. This one's self-explanatory, right? I don't need to explain that. I struggled between going with campy or cartoonish on this title because it is both. And I mean cartoonish in just the most complimentary way possible. This is a live action cartoon if I ever saw one. And again, I mean that as a compliment. I feel a little crazy about this movie because I watched it a few times and I thought, this might be so far my favorite of 2026, which is fine because as always, I will preach that low art is as important as high art. Maybe I just haven't seen enough stuff this year of the more kind of serious filmmaking side, but I feel like I have watched a fair amount of new movies, and I don't know that anything struck me as accomplishing what it set out to do as much as this one. That's really what I'm after, right? It's not that I want to put movies against each other. I put movies against what they're trying to achieve and against its own list of what this is trying to be. It went so hard, and really I've started to wonder whether it is perfect. And maybe I have one edit, so maybe it's not perfect, but gosh, did they really pull off making a fun rendition of what He-Man is supposed to be? And I say that even though when I watched the first time, I went in with very little, I guess, expectation, but also background because I remember loving He-Man as a kid. And I remember my action figure of He-Man very well, which tells me that I liked the cartoon a lot. But I actually have no recollection of the cartoon really, or of ever having seen the original 1987 movie. So when I was prepping this, I did watch the 87 movie and some of the original cartoon. And just as a refresher and to see for myself what this was really rebooting and where was the stuff coming from. And it was really interesting to watch the cartoon because while I vaguely remember what the characters look like and that it was fun to watch, I don't really remember the content. And when I was watching it as an adult, I was like, wow, this was really interesting vibe of TV back then where they were trying to instill really good morals in these kids through this cartoon. It was very simple in its storytelling, and it's not really getting too complicated about what a hero is and why, except that they really just lean into telling you flat out, this is the lesson you're trying to learn. And He-Man is very strong. He's the strongest. He's the master of the universe. And yet we're trying to learn lessons about not fighting and teaching kids good things like teamwork. And it's really fascinating because that is so much of what this movie ended up being. This movie is so much like this action hero movie, and yet it's really about dialogue and what is positive masculinity and what is conflict resolution and how do you integrate different parts of yourself into who you're trying to be. And at the same time, it's just fun. It's what I've been asking for a long time from filmmaking, which is color, fun, and maybe let go of logic a little bit. And not that every movie should be that. There are a lot of movies that should be toned down in color. There are a lot of movies that should be logical and make sense. And there are a lot of movies that should go for really tearing your soul apart with emotion. And then there's these. It's just fun. You're just supposed to show up and have fun. And I think the return of these is really nice for me because I feel like that was missing a lot. That's something that I personally feel is missing from the MCU. I never feel that way about those movies. The closest I get to that feeling with those movies at this point is like a Spider-Man. And I did see that this past week. I did enjoy it. I think the Spider-Man movies still work for me, where like the bigger MCU where it's like 20 superheroes don't work for me at all. And That's a very personal take. Most people don't agree with me. That's fine. I just think they get like, I don't care about anyone. It's too messy. There's too many characters. It's all over the place. And it's usually just like such a bummer. Like it is not, I'm not having fun during those movies the way I have fun during this movie. And I'm not sure why it didn't do better. I think you really could boil it down to some marketing issues, or maybe audiences are just having to get used to this again. And so is the studio having to get used to this kind of filmmaking and storytelling and how to market it, because I'm not sure they know how to do that. I would also think there may be some casting decisions that influenced whether it did well. A certain actor seems to be like a box office curse. And honestly, like, I don't even think that that's a bad thing, because I question the choice of casting Jared Leto in this. I still think that character came out amazing, kind of to just like to despite the fact that that it is Jared Leto. And I'm not even gonna get into his acting abilities or what he's up to in the world. I just think that there is something there, because it seems to happen with every movie he's in. And I'm still glad that this character worked for me, and I'll get into that. And the casting outside of that, I wasn't really like inspired by it. The casting for me was kind of interesting because obviously I know Idris Elba, and I know Alison Brie, and I know James Purefoy, and yet the stars of this, I don't really know a lot about Nicholas Galitzine or Camila Mendes, to be honest. I don't know that I saw it as a bad casting choice. It was more that I thought nothing of it. And it was actually such a treat to see Nicholas in this role, and kind of a revelation for me, because I was so delighted with his performance. I think his ability to imbue this character with such sincerity and this earnest goodness and really just bright-eyed enthusiasm as Adam getting to go back to Eternos really worked so well. He sold the moment of getting the powers so well, and the joy of being strong all of a sudden when he's been so weak physically in his world. And it's just so delightful to watch that performance that I think it really pushed how much I liked the movie even further, because he's a delight to watch really work out this character and all the things that happened to him, which I'll get into a little bit more. And Alison Brie, I have to shout her out, because I think it goes underappreciated maybe how much she sells the humor of the Skeletor scenes by her reactions to him. She was so funny. Her comedic timing really, really worked so perfectly in this movie. And not to praise Jared Leto. I don't want to, honestly. I think the CGI, the writing, and the voice modulation did a lot for me here, because the writing of Skeletor is beyond excellent. I, having watched a bit of the cartoon and the other movie and this, think that so much of this world depends on Skeletor working as a character, because it is this rare thing of like, this guy's just bad. Like, we're not going to even give you a reason he's bad. He's got a skull for a face. That was my favorite line of the movie, I think. I just love this simplicity of Adam wanting to understand as this conflict resolution HR guy. He wants to understand so badly why someone would do this. Like, how do I resolve this person wanting to hurt others? And Tila just having to say, he's got a skull for a face. And it's that easy. And it's why he's pushed into the conflict resolution being, I have to kill you now. There is no resolving this through words, because Skeletor is not interested. He's a baddie. And the writing of this Skeletor, the reveling in the theater and this like flamboyant kind of drama This, when I raise my fist, that's the crescendo. That to me is such a hilarious line. That whole bit, every time that he's just being over the top and wanting to revel in being a bad guy and everyone around him being like, this is so awkward, is so funny to me. All of the humor in this movie works so well for me on a personal level, but I do think it is weirdly a kind of movie that I would suggest to anyone, even if they're not into this kind of thing, because I think it's fun and it's funny. And again, like I went in the first watch and I couldn't remember any of the source material. And it wasn't until after I think I watched it already twice that I went back and saw it. And it still all worked for me, even though, yes, I come with a base understanding of who He-Man is and base understanding of liking this world and this idea of this kind of storytelling, but I couldn't remember all the references. It wasn't working for me on that level, and it still worked for me the first time so much that I watched it again. So I do think I suggest it to a lot of people. And for me, like a lot of the reason this works, I have to take a guess. Travis Knight, I think this director came in and clearly loves this kind of filmmaking, loves this kind of joy of just making something fun. And he just nailed it on so many levels, like the nostalgia. Again, it works because now having seen all the other stuff and watched it again after, I'm getting a lot more of the references again. And it wasn't like I didn't get it the first time that this is Dolph Lundgren. Like I know who that is. And I know he was the original He-Man. And even if I don't remember the movie, because I might have seen it as a child, I'm not sure. But even if I'm seeing it for the first time, I get who that is and I get the whole scene because I know enough about pop culture. And even if I didn't, it was a nice scene. And all of the references to the characters, this nostalgia bit works so well because of a lot of storytelling choices, which I want to get into after. But this whole Adam being removed from Eternos and then coming back in is what makes a lot of the referential stuff work, even if you've never seen this stuff before. But also other choices Travis Knight is making is like the color. I mean, I'm so happy to have color back as someone who often laments this decade and a half of Nolan-esque gray filmmaking that's been just taking over all of Hollywood. I was happy to see it back with Superman last year, and I'm even happier with this. It's just so bright and so in your face, and I think it contributes to the fun and joy of it. It's just fun to look at. It's so much. It's like an assault on the senses in a nice way. And again, the humor, he nailed a lot of what's funny about Skeletor, what's funny about HR, and melding an Eternos with an Earth and trying to bring the Earth stuff into Eternos, which is like this corporate HR Adam, is having to contend with this very different society through having been on Earth for so long and having grown up here instead, and having all of these awkward exchanges with everybody. And the awkwardness always works. Even that cringer closing scene kills me. The lean back laughing like in the cartoons. Again, even if I couldn't remember it, I knew exactly what that reference was. I got that. I got that we were like doing this like campy, cartoonish 80s laugh. And the look to camera, the fourth wall, the like, this is bizarre and weird. It's so funny because it is. It's not natural. None of it is natural. And it's not supposed to be. None of this is supposed to be believable or logical. That's what's fun about these movies, is like it's complete fantasy in every way. And why I give so much credit to a Travis Knight for all of this, because a lot of that is in the writing. But really, it's this animation guy who came in and made this live action cartoon. And I praised Brad Bird back in the Mission Impossible episode of this podcast for coming in and doing Ghost Protocol after only having done animated films. And even there, I thought there was a real balance between the CGI and practical. I think this movie nails that so completely. I'm actually amazed by how well the practical and the CGI worked in this film, because it is very CGI heavy. The CGI gives it this scale, like the big wide shots of the world of Eternos. But really a lot of practical stuff is really still being done, which is amazing when you think about the comparison to the 1987 movie. I think the 1987 movie is really an interesting watch, and I would recommend it to a lot of people because I don't think it's an essentially good movie. I think it has script problems, acting problems, and yet it also is just full of so much delightful filmmaking craft, whether it's set design or a piece of acting. Like Frank Langella as Skeletor is amazing because it's being done with a mask. And this is a really interesting place where you can look at the balance of CGI versus a practical effect. He gave an amazing performance through a mask, which is very hard to do. And yet here we've got a completely CGI Skeletor, which I like the decision, even though I'm someone who always wants to lean towards a practical effect, because when you've got a baddie that's a skeleton face, like how animated do you make a face of bone? And the humor of the character almost comes from like this skeleton face emoting and being over the top. And then you've got all of the baddies that are in the movie that are prosthetics. They're really doing this in practical effects, and the stunts are great. And the fighting works so well because it is really a great balance between practical stunts and then mixing the extra, adding the dose of CGI that you need to get it to be this alien world, these monster-like creatures, this weird cave system, or whatever the set is. It's really fascinating to watch how well Travis Knight found the balance between these different techniques and how to create this world. And I just think he nailed it so hard. And I have to think it comes from his background as making movies that are animation. And when you join that with this script, which I think really found this beautiful way of taking what was in the cartoon, which is teaching positivity and talking about things like learning who you are. And like Adam has to meld these two sides of himself now into one person, unlike the cartoon where he has two personas. This is one person who contains multitudes, and he's going to find a balance between being the Adam that is HR dialogue resolution guy and a really strong He-Man who can kill anyone because he's that strong and he has a big sword and big muscles. And just talking about the masculinity conversation between him and Duncan and how his influence on Duncan starts to work and how they're going to be a little bit different of a society. I love watching the statues of the kings crumble at the last fight because it is the end of ruling in that way. And Adam reconciling this idea of who his father wanted him to be, this strong warrior, and really who he is in the world, which is someone who would rather talk things out. And again, that goes back to the cartoon. And the script writing is so amazing because they made this decision to go with the origin story of he's from Eternos, but then he ends up on Earth and has to do this amazing thing, this character, of keeping that world alive despite everyone on Earth, for his own good, trying to tell him, this isn't real. You imagined it to deal with some trauma. And they're not doing that to be evil or torture this kid. They're trying to help him because clearly it sounds insane to everybody. And he has to keep this world alive for himself through just faith in what he knows, that it is the truth. And then it creates this dynamic of, if you weren't one of the original watchers of the show and you're not someone who remembers all the references, what Adam does is create this fantasy world with all these character names, which are the cartoon things that are so absurd from the 80s, and makes them real for the audience. So the audience relates to Adam in all these spectacular ways. Like for this alien who has all the power, he is so relatable for what they've done to him as Adam on Earth. And Adam who has to deal with being HR, and Adam who has to have this roommate tell him, why can't you be like everybody else and just go to your job, clock in and clock out, and look forward to your next little vacation. And I don't know how this affects other people, but that line hit me in my soul because I think a lot of us feel like we want more out of life than that. And to watch Adam, who is so special, so much more special than anybody else could be because he's like Superman special, be asked to give up that side of himself and just conform to society as it is on Earth. All of it so relatable for this completely unrelatable character. And all of this just works in beautiful balance for this really funny, really silly, really cartoonish movie to actually have a lot going for it in the depth of like what it's saying, because I think essentially it is a family movie. It's probably for kids as well, in the way that any kid's movie should work for an adult as well. If it's really well done, the kid won't hear the joke that's for the adult because it'll just go over their head, and the adult gets to laugh at something that the kid doesn't understand. So I don't know how much it is for kids or adults. It should be for both. But I do think it just relies on this humor of just like awkward adult stuff and all of this ilk of like this ridiculous cartoon with these ridiculous characters that I think probably in the 80s they would have said boys like this kind of stuff, and it would have gone by the wayside that girls like me liked He-Man just as much as boys did. But this really childlike take on this one has an extending neck and this one has a big fist and this one, just all of these like really silly childlike kind of characters, and making that real in this kind of context of like a movie that you can both take seriously as a story, but really it's not that serious. I really do think they struck such a beautiful balance, and I wish I could influence people to see this. I think anyone who listens to this has probably seen it already and kind of really loves it. And I wish I could get other people to tune into this and really hear about the merit of it, because I think we're coming up against maybe audiences getting used to movies like this again. I think that's part of people seeing this on SVOD and being so pleasantly surprised. I saw a lot of chatter of like, oh, why didn't I see this in theaters? Or I wish I'd seen this in theaters. Why didn't anybody say this was so fun and so good? And yeah, I think studios maybe don't know how to market these anymore, and people haven't had a lot of these kinds of movies out for a while. I might be wrong, but it felt like that. It felt really, really special because it's been kind of like a dearth of these kind of movies for me for such a long time, that other movies have been around. Like, the reason this feels special in 2026 is not because like this movie is better than a serious kind of movie, but like no one stopped making the serious kind of movies, really. Like the Oscar contenders come around every year, while this kind of movie, I don't know. This is what the MCU universe never gives me, just reveling in the fun of what superheroes can do. Not that all superheroes need to be this way. So I really praise this movie so much for just like having both the really fun, you're just here to be entertained, just sit back and watch this cartoonish silliness happen. And at the same time, like listen to this really nice message about learning who you are and accepting who you are on all levels, and learning how to fight on different fronts for those that you care about, and also self-belief and masculinity and how to be a positive person. But also like, LOL, this guy has a big fist and he punches people and he calls them Fisto, and that's hilarious. And piles and piles of HR jokes. So all that said, I hope that people tune in for this and maybe are inspired to watch it some more, because I'm going to watch it a dozen more times for sure. And if you made it this far, this is the time where I usually say, this is what I'm going to watch, or I have no idea what I'm going to watch. And this is one of those weeks where I have no idea what I'm going to watch. I finished the last episode saying I really wanted to do a psych rewatch, and I didn't, because on a personal note, I have family in town. And doing the psych rewatch is totally doable for me because I binge like no other, but not when there's other people in the house who want to watch the television. And psych requires about 30 hours a week to get ready for a podcast episode. So I can't control 20 plus hours of TV viewing and the prep. So that's going to wait till after spooky season. And I think I have this episode and 2 more episodes before I get into spooky season rewatches, because I want to tell everyone that spooky season starts on September 1st in my world. So in the world of this podcast, which means that when I drop my September 1st episode of the podcast, it will be a spooky season watch. And that means that this week I have no idea. I just watched Sterling Point for the first time. I could do a rewatch of that. It is very interesting to look at that show in comparison to what 90s and early aughts TV was doing in the coming of age teen drama space and how that is functioning nowadays. Or I could, just go ahead and rewatch Ride or Die because Anna Waddingham is amazing. But I don't know. We'll see what's popular this week, what's going on. I've also been watching just like a bunch of British crime drama, but those are hard sometimes because like I'm not going to do 19 seasons of Death in Paradise on this podcast, even though it is one of my favorite shows to rewatch. I could just generally do a podcast about how awesome that show is. So, all that said, I guess tune in for the mystery that is next week and stay cool.